Good morning. I'd like to call the Kankakee County full board meeting via teleconference for April 14th to order. Today's invocation will be from Ron Kinzinger, County Board Member.
Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time that we can pause and understand that you're in ultimate control of everything that's happening. We understand that as we learn to respect and love you, you take care of us in spite of what we do and how we act and what we say. We ask that you guide each of us in this meeting this morning, that we conduct ourselves in a manner representative of the community that we represent. And Lord, give us wisdom for this work that is before us. At the same time, Lord, we thank you for those who sacrifice for all of us in terms of our health, in terms of our physical safety, and in terms of how we go about our business. Guide all of us, lead all of us, and may all of us understand that you are our Lord and Savior. In your name we pray, amen.
Amen. Thank you. Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Boy, that was an experiment. Zoom works for a lot, but it didn't work for unison Pledge of Allegiances very well. So we need a roll call, please.
Mr. Washington.
Present.
Mr. Hess.
Present.
Mr. Tholen. Mrs. Polk.
Present.
Mr. Snipes.
Present.
Mr. Byrne.
Present.
Mr. Seroy.
Present.
Mr. Lear.
Present.
Mrs. Weber.
Present.
Mrs. Peters. Mr. Payton. Mrs. Parker.
Present.
Ms. Dunbar. Mr. Kinzinger.
Present.
Mr. Fairfield.
Present.
Mr. Zenz.
Present.
Ms. Haas.
Present.
Mr. Carrico.
Present.
Mr. Eckhoff.
Present.
Mr. Smith. Mr. Swanson.
Present.
Ms. Zakulo.
Present.
Mr. Featherling.
Present.
Mr. Donnell.
Present.
Mr. Miller.
Present.
Mr. Long.
Present.
Mr. Kirkstra. Mr. Wheeler.
Present. We have a quorum. Under public commentary, obviously we're doing things a little bit different. We have one for public comment. Be calling this individual on the phone and they will make their public comment. It is now 9:04 and we have 15 minutes for public comment. So let me do that real quick.
Hello, this is John.
Hello, John. If we could get a mic check really quick. This is Jonathan Schinnebarger on the phone. Could you check your mic, please, or talk through so we can make sure we can hear you?
Yes, good morning. Can you hear me?
Can the board members hear? Just a head nod? Okay, please go ahead, sir.
All right. Good morning. My name is Jonathan Schinnebarger. I am a resident of Bourbonnais, and my wife and I both work in Kankakee. I'm in Jackie Haas's district. I'd like to thank whoever manages the Facebook page, as well as Kelly in the administration department for responding to my request for information and making it possible for me to quote unquote be here this morning. Given that the COVID-19 pandemic is on track to kill hundreds of thousands of people throughout the world, and the ways we know the virus spreads, I'd like to ask how Sheriff Downey and the correctional officers at Jerome Combs Detention Center, what measures they're taking to protect the inmates. I have toured the facilities there a couple of times, and am particularly curious how social distancing measures might be implemented, and what, if any, testing measures are being taken there. I think we're probably all familiar with how quickly the virus has spread at Shapiro, and I would hate to see those within the county jail face a similar health risk. I've also spoken previously during public comment about my concerns regarding the county's financial reliance on Jerome Combs' federal marshal's contract, and these concerns remain unaddressed. Now that Joe Biden is the presumptive Democratic presidential nominee, his immigration policies are certainly less radical than those of, say, Bernie Sanders, but nonetheless, should he win the election come this November, the number of ICE detainees nationally will likely decrease, leading to a likely corresponding decrease here in Kankakee County. It's very concerning to me that we are unsure of the exact magnitude that this would have on the county's financial health, as Sheriff Downey has continued to be unable to identify the net financial benefit to the county of this, including separating the portion of the marshal's contract that is used by ICE as opposed to other federal prisoners, as well as separate out the expenses the expenses involved with looking after these ICE detainees. So I personally work as an accountant in my professional capacity in a government role. I know that it is certainly well within reason to expect Sheriff Downey and his folks to account for the costs of that program and the financial benefits of it. I would certainly be willing to lend a hand for aid if that is something that is needed, but I'm well aware that many folks within the board have that accounting expertise and could assist with that if needed. Shout out to my fellow member of Venture Christian Church, County Board Member Mike Zentz. It seems to me that at this point, Sheriff Downey's failure to provide this financial information is at best an issue of competence and at worst a matter of willful lack of transparency. Either way, given the importance to the county of this financial revenue, I think it's important to our health going forward. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to hearing how the board addresses this issue.
Thank you. Have a good day. All righty. We have no other public comment. Turn that down. So we have a proclamation today. It is a proclamation declaring the month of May as Mental Health Awareness Month. Next month we will have another proclamation that will also share that month with somebody else. We're drafting that, but I thought since it is one of our county board members' life's work is community mental health, and really working with the public in general regarding all types of health issues, I thought County Board Member Jackie Haas, who brought this in last year and again this year, would like to read that proclamation into the record.
Sure, I would be honored to do that, Andy. Thank you. It's a little bit lengthy, so bear with me. So it's proclamation of the County Board of Kankakee County, Illinois. It's a proclamation in recognition of Mental Health Awareness Month. Whereas the mental health of every citizen is essential to the emotional and economic prosperity of our families, communities, and businesses. And whereas mental health is a key component of every individual's overall physical health and emotional well-being. And whereas mental illness affects people of all ages, races, ethnicities, and income levels in our communities. And whereas suicide is one of the leading causes of death overall in Illinois. And whereas mental health conditions are not only common, they are treatable, and early and effective intervention can save lives and change the trajectories of people living with mental illness. And whereas only 50% of individuals with a serious form of mental illness seek treatment. And whereas feelings of personal shame and fears of social stigma and discrimination prevent many living with mental illness from seeking help. And whereas stigma leads to fear, mistrust, and violence against people with mental illness, who are significantly more likely to be victims rather than perpetrators of violent crimes. And whereas stigma can be reduced by increasing awareness and education of mental illness and available resources for those suffering from mental health conditions. And whereas we strive to create communities that support mental wellness by increasing access to treatment, educating ourselves and our communities about mental wellness and mental illness, and supporting our citizens as they seek to improve their mental health. And whereas greater public awareness about mental wellness can positively transform attitudes about and towards people with mental illness, making it easier for citizens to seek help. Now therefore be it proclaimed by the county board that it recognizes the struggle of many county residents have with mental illness, and recognize the month of May as Mental Health Awareness Month. Proclaimed and adopted on this 14th day of April, 2020.
Thank you. Should I take that reading of the proclamation as the motion to approve, Mrs. Haas?
Yes.
All righty. Is there a second to that motion? Second from Mr. Miller. Is there any other comment on this proclamation?
I just want to say thank you for bringing it to the attention again, and there's a lot of work that goes on in the community to bring awareness and treatment. So thank you for recognizing it.
Yep. All righty, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. We should pay attention to this now more than ever. We're dealing with a situation that is profoundly affecting a lot of people, and this is a whole new world we're living in, and some people aren't dealing with it very well. I can tell you that. It's just different. It's a lot different. So moving on, we have a minutes of the last meeting from March 10th, 2020. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion.
Second.
All right, Tinker was loudest. Did I hear George with a second, I think?
Yeah.
Any corrections, deletions, additions? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Classic. Under Claims Committee reports, we didn't get a report from the auditor this month on claims. So we're moving on to the other claims, except for that one. Could you please read those in the record? Oh yeah, I apologize. I apologize. Yeah, we don't have those. So we're moving on to committee reports. Department reports, if we can get those right in the record. Sorry.
Absolutely. County Treasurer's monthly report for February 2020, total cash and investments of $772,919.11. County Collector's monthly report for February 2020, total cash and bank and investments, $772,919.11. Finance Department, total checking accounts and cash, total $13,835,292.30. The general fund, a deficit balance of $2,742,996.55. Coroner's monthly report for January, total calls 111, coroner's cases 20, autopsies 9, toxicology 9, 4 donations, 1 fetal, 63 hospice, 26 referrals, 75 cremations, 3 x-rays. Coroner's monthly report for February, total calls 99, coroner's cases 14, 7 autopsies, 8 toxicology, 1 fetal, 59 hospice, 24 referrals, 52 cremations, 2 outside autopsies. Coroner's income report for January 2020, total fees of $6,020.73. The coroner's income report for February 2020, a total of $3,396.56. Circuit clerk cash book for January 2020 month end, total dispersed $390,637.82. Circuit clerk's cash book for month end February 2020, $443,932.11. Recorder's monthly report for February 2020, disbursement fees paid to the county treasurer, $87,247.27. County clerk's monthly report for February 2020, total fees $34,925.54. Animal control monthly report for February 2020, total submitted to the county treasurer, $43,231. In the IPTIP building fund, $345.65. Total animals handled, 95. Monthly building division report for February 2020, 41 total permits, fees of $14,704. Total extra fees of $1,160 for a total of $15,864. Monthly resolution list, the total to the county, $24,644.47.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve, combine and approve the claims on the floor?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
You want to pick one? I think that was Mr. Long, I believe, with the motion. If not, you just got credit for it. And the second, how about Mr. Seroy? He's sitting there quietly. All right, we got Mr. Seroy. Sorry, when it's all together, I just gotta like guess and pick people. I apologize. If I see you move, then I'll do it. So all those in favor, say aye. Oh, excuse me. That's a roll call vote. I apologize.
Roll call.
Or through voice vote.
Sorry, I'm reading the wrong line. Voice vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same sign. Those opposed. All right, motion carries. And this delay thing is kind of throwing me here. All right. Now on the consent agenda, I need to move 41 and 42 to be done when we do the other planning and zoning items that relate to rural transit. Because even though our local match is in kind, it is technically spending money. So I want to make sure that we do that correctly. So 41 and 42 are going to be moved. Is there anything else that needs to come off of consent agenda?
Item 40. Item 40.
Item 40? Okay.
Yes.
So that's going to come off to be considered separately. Anything else? All righty then. If one final time, nothing else to come off, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved. Yes.
Was that Mr. Washington? And a second was from
Brenda.
Brenda Zaculo?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yes.
And we need to get those read, and then we'll do a roll call. Titles read.
Yes. The appointment of Troy S. Kaufman to the Limestone Township Fire Protection District. The appointment of Carl A. Goodwin to the Blooms Grove Cemetery Association. The appointment of Scott Bertrand to the Blooms Grove Cemetery Association. The reappointment of Maurice O'Keefe to the Mantino Community Fire Protection District. The reappointment of Peggy A. Scoff to the Blooms Grove Cemetery Association. And the reappointment of Steve E. Cody to the Board of Review.
All righty. That'll be the roll call vote, please.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Hess.
Aye.
Mrs. Polk.
Aye. Aye.
Mr. Snipes.
Aye.
Mr. Byrne.
Aye.
Mr. Seroy.
Aye.
Mr. Lear.
Aye.
Mrs. Weber.
Aye.
Mrs. Parker.
Aye.
Ms. Dunbar.
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger.
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield.
Aye.
Mr. Zenz.
Aye.
Ms. Haas.
Aye.
Mr. Carrico.
Aye.
Mr. Eckhoff.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Sam Payton have joined the meeting.
Mr. Payton,
Aye.
Mr. Swanson,
Aye.
Ms. Zakulo,
Aye.
Mr. Featherling, Mr. Featherling, Mr. Donnell,
Aye. Aye.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Long,
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler.
Aye. Motion carries. If we can give us just a second here, we've got to catch up. Are we good on what he was pointing out in the corner, or was it just Sam coming on? We're good? Okay. All right, so we're going to move back to number 40. If we could maybe get the title read into the record, and then we can go with Mr. Kinzinger's question.
Resolution of the County Board of Kankakee County, Illinois, regarding an amendment to Chapter 105, Buildings and Building Regulations, Article 3, Section 105.287, Contractor Registration Fees.
All righty. And you had a question, Mr. Kinzinger, or comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm opposed to raising fees on county businesses based on the idea they've not been raised in several years, and the current fees are less than other counties. This type of thinking prevails in Illinois, and it has to stop somewhere. Additionally, the fee increase has been proposed as a way to fund a necessary software upgrade for planning, zoning, and building. I strongly agree with the purchase of the software, but who's stepping back to look how the entire system might be simplified and even portions eliminated? In typical Illinois thinking and fashion, we maintain or add more bureaucratic steps that cost more money to implement and enforce. I intend to vote no on this, and thank you for listening.
All righty. At this point, I forgot, we need to get a motion to approve to start with. Is there any, and Mr. Washington, is there a second on the floor?
Second.
Second.
Is that Mr. Featherling with a second? Was that a second from you, Mr. Featherling?
Second from you, Mr. Yes.
Okay. All righty. Any other comments, questions? All righty then. This will be a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Washington,
Aye.
Mr. Hess,
Aye.
Mrs. Polk,
Aye.
Mr. Snipes,
Aye.
Mr. Byrne,
Nay.
Mr. Seroy,
Aye.
Mr. Lear,
Aye.
Mrs. Weber,
Aye.
Mr. Payton,
Aye.
Mrs. Parker,
Aye.
Ms. Dunbar,
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger,
Nay.
Mr. Fairfield,
Mr. Fairfield?
Aye.
Okay.
Mr. Zenz,
Nay.
Ms. Haas,
Aye.
Mr. Carrico.
Nay.
Is that a nay?
Yep.
Okay. Mr. Eckhoff,
Nay.
Mr. Smith, Mr. Smith,
Is that an aye, Mr. Smith? I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
Said aye. He said aye.
Mr. Swanson,
Nay.
Ms. Zakulo,
Nay.
Mr. Featherling,
Aye.
Mr. Donnell,
Nay.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Long,
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Motion carries. Is there a count?
16-8.
17-8.
17-8 to the affirmative. All righty, moving on. I guess that was the last one. The other two items are going to be moved later. So I did have a couple of updates moving into before we get into these other things that we have to approve or not approve, as the case may be. Wanted to give an update to the board. Hopefully you all have seen those press releases and announcements that I've sent out regarding the work we're doing on ADA work we're doing over at the courthouse. That work includes the courtroom. Judge Albrecht's courtroom is being brought up to ADA standards. That work is ongoing right now. They've got a lot of progress. We have the engineering done. We have the final bids approved. We opened all of the bids on all of this work for the circle drive in the back, which includes the curb and the sidewalk, which was part of the ADA grant that we received from the state, and the front steps were part of the grant as well. So originally, we were going to come out of this with roughly about $80,000 as far as what we'd have to pay for all of this, and which is not nearly the millions we were told years ago. Those that have been on the board remember those days when it was going to cost us $2 to $4 million to become ADA compliant in the courthouse. That wasn't the case. We are going to be compliant when this project is done, and it has been signed off on by the Attorney General's office. So we are in a path to get that done before the courthouse reopens. Obviously, this situation has been bad as far as COVID goes, but we took advantage of it to get this work done all at once. But part of the issue is, and any of those folks who've worked on an old house, if you start getting into a wall and looking behind something, you may find something that you didn't want to find. And when we pulled off the front steps out front, we found some stuff we didn't want to find, but we have to address. Mr. Kinzinger went over and saw those. We wanted a board member who has specific expertise in the field to take a look at that, and it was somewhat of a mess. There was 100-year-old rails, actually, not the ties, the rails from trains that were supporting block that was masonry put in there to support the steps. And it's our estimation that a lot of, and others have estimated this, that a lot of the cracking and upheaval we have seen is from the expansion, if you will, of that steel that is lifted and pushed not only upwards but also to the side as well. Some of those monuments that are cracked that the lamps are sitting on, I don't know if you've noticed that if you've been over there. It's pretty substantial, the damage, and we were fixing all of that along with the steps. But unfortunately, we can't just put it back together without fixing the supports for the steps. And so we did have a couple of bids put out there. We're pouring concrete footings instead of putting the steel back in there, which is a bad solution with the kind of weather we have, really anywhere, but especially here with cold, hot, and that's just one day. It's something that we had to address. The low bid came in, and you have to forgive me, I can't remember who was awarded that bid. I believe it was PSI, but we poured the first part of it the other day, but the total cost, including architecture work, the actual work itself, is just over $20,000. So that was on top of the 80 that we did for the circle drive, the repaving there, and everything else that is our end of things. So I had to tell that to the board, but you can't put the steps back together. So we had to move on it. They're doing the work now. It is technically an emergency once you get those steps up and realize you can't put it all back together. So that's an advisory thing. I don't know if Mr. Kinzinger has comment on the condition and the need for this versus the approach that we took for the board.
Andy, I did look at those. I appreciate you calling, and you're correct. There were two bids, and the approach was agreed on by the bidder as well as the architect. So I think it's an excellent solution to a problem. It was well done on the part of the county and the way they addressed it.
Yeah, I want to thank you personally for going over there, and we all bring something to the table, and that's something really valuable you bring to the board. We also decided that it wasn't going to be up to the people pouring the concrete to actually set the block. We were going to leave that to the masonry company that was doing the restoration work on the steps. They have a specific skill set on working with historic buildings, and it was better to isolate that process with the people that were doing the steps work, because then you wouldn't have say, well, he did it wrong, or he did it wrong, or you have it contained within one point of accountability, if you will. So that was the other side of that. So it has been good work, but that's why some people may have driven by and seen the tape out there, and you know, what was going on in the courthouse. That's the part that you see on Court Street. There's a lot more going on besides that. And, which is something we've been waiting. I think the first letter we got was in 2012 from the Attorney General. So at the end of this, we will have done right by those with disabilities who want to serve on a jury or be a litigator or, you know, be a judge or view the proceedings even. We can effectively get them in. I forgot about the ramp. The ramp is being redone to ADA code as well into the building. So we're finishing up that project, and it's been a long time coming. So any other questions about that? I just wanted to update the board on that work. Mr. Snipes?
Just one, I do concur. I had just put up the picture of that, of the metal that we saw under the bottom. I applauded that it lasted over 100 years, but certainly when I saw some deterioration, I concurred. I know it's going to cost some additional dollars, but anytime you get into repairing something, as you said, we have to just hope that we can keep the cost to a minimum, but we know there's going to be additional costs. In this case, it is, but it is warranted. And I do concur that, you know, even with the $20,000 and the fact that we got it's a historical building, so the task is they have to also maintain that as well. I think the little bit over $20,000 is nominal from what we could have expected. That's just my point.
Any other thoughts or comments from the board? Okay. Also wanted to give a kind of a cash flow update. I understand there was a lot of calls flying around, and I understand the concern because we have a lot of time on our hands these days to think about the what ifs of what's going on at the county and what's happening at the state and unemployment and, you know, people's ability to go out and purchase products. What's the implication on sales tax and use tax and income tax and all the other things that fund what's going on here as far as the services we provide as a county, but not just us, the school districts and the municipalities. I'm sorry?
On this one?
Hold on just a second.
Share. And then top left super says cash flow. Oh, I got it.
Okay, so this was the first thing I wanted to show the group. Sorry about that. Uncharted waters on many fronts around these parts these days. This is something that I asked Steve to put together, and actually Kelly kind of edited down to the key information I want to mention. Back in 2017, we were getting $3 million a year in TAWs, which are basically borrowing next year's taxes to pay this year's bills. And we had a cash balance at this time of the year, roughly, of $981,000 in the bank, which is not even enough to cover a payroll. Fast forward March of 2018, we went down. We went to $2.5 million in loans, and we had $1.3 million in the bank. In 19, it was $2.5 million in loans, and it was 2.7 in the bank. This year, we're not taking any loans, and on March 20th, we had 3.1 million in the bank, and April 10th, when I produced this sheet, or when Kelly did, it's 4.2. So really, we have more cash in the bank this time of the year than we have really in as far back as I can tell, maybe 2012 or 2010, since the crash in 09. So I just want to put a little perspective. That doesn't mean everything is okay or it's going to be okay in 3 months. But as far as what we've done up until this point, we put ourselves in a position, you know, if this would have happened, what's going on with COVID, if this would have happened 2 years ago, I don't know if we could have weathered that. Now I think we're going to be able to get to the point where we're looking at being able to not make knee-jerk reactions and overreact and really act when it's appropriate. So I wanted to get that information to the board. Is there any questions about just this part right now? We can get into specifics about other things, but I definitely wanted to make sure you saw this. Any questions, comments? Okay.
That's great.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Lear.
I think that cash flow update is an excellent visual to help us understand where the county stands financially.
Thank you. And, you know, realize that we don't get the income tax and use tax and all those other things for, it's about a 3-month lag. So we don't really have any idea what that's going to be. We can estimate, you know, you could look at what's going on in retail and the restaurants, but it doesn't tell the whole picture. You know, we had just an insane amount of people filing for unemployment. Who knows if they'll be back to work next month? You know, when I say next month, in a couple of weeks, we hope they are. Obviously, we all do. But there's no predicting any of that. So we'll have to just kind of ride this out and know that we have the resources to ride it out. I've got Steve McCarty looking at cash flow all the way through September, and to make sure that if in fact our first distribution is impacted, what impact could we live with in order to still provide the same services in employment levels at the county that the public expects. With that, you know, but it takes time and we have to see how some things shake out. So I want to at least let you know that we're working on that and really look at it almost on a daily basis. At times it's like putting together a jigsaw puzzle where the pieces haven't been cut out yet. It's hard to put that picture together when all of the facts don't exist, or they change from day to day, which is what we have seen. So that being said, is there any other issues that you might have with cash flow or financial updates in this climate? I know there's a lot of questions, and if I can answer them, I will. If not, I'll just have to say we have to take a wait and see.
All right, we have one.
Mr. Snipes?
It'll be interesting. I mean, I applaud going from the red to the black, but I'm also, I don't want to say disturbed, but I'm cautious in that a lot of our restaurants and things that where we generate sales tax from are probably going to be diminished because they're closed and other businesses closing. So I don't know what that impact is going to be upon us. I don't even know. I don't believe that you'll be able to answer that question until time progresses and we determine that. But I'm in hopes that they get back to business so that the economy will begin to flow. I don't know what impact that it has on Kankakee County, but I'm certain you are, but I know I am kind of cautious as to how this is going to affect Kankakee County.
Yeah, I did. Me too. And, you know, we start hearing anecdotal numbers, you know, restaurants are off by 50-60%. Obviously, they bring in more tax revenue than a grocery store does. The tax rate at a grocery store, you know, obviously is less. So when you start to add up all of that, but you're seeing huge spikes in people shopping in grocery stores. Now, is that going to cover off half of that difference? You can guesstimate, yes, but, you know, are people still going to buy TVs and clothes, or are they buying, you know, at the brick and mortar locally, or are they going online? I have a feeling that may have slowed to maybe half of what it normally is. But as I've had to go in for emergency stuff from grocery stores that also sell hard goods, I see people with TVs in the cart. So, you know, it's you know, there is still shopping going on along those lines. So it's just something I watch, and it's almost on a daily basis for all information I can get my hands on. It's
Andy?
Yes, who's that, Todd?
Yeah. I would like to commend the efforts. This is cash. I'm talking about the cash flow update. This is efforts that have gone from the past, and this is kind of the fruits of the labor, so to speak, of the work that's been done in previous years to get us to this place. So I'm happy to see those numbers, and I hope everybody else is. Going forward, I don't think any of us know what that's going to entail, but I'm happy of the work that was done in the past to provide these numbers currently.
Thank you. Yeah, it wasn't all from, we don't just get revenue from one source, and we don't have expenses from one source. It's a lot of work by a lot of different people pulling on the same end of the rope. So that's the financial update, and we can get into other specifics later if you have questions at the end of the meeting. So moving on to the next item on the agenda. Get back here. It's it's the third amended purchase of county vehicles and related equipment by the Sheriff's Department. I just took your job, I'm sorry.
Not a problem. I'm just here for the eye candy. So,
Please, sir.
resolution of the County Board of Kankakee County, Illinois, regarding the third amended purchase of county vehicles and related equipment by the Sheriff's Department.
Okay, is there a motion to approve first, and then we can get into is there a motion? I'm sorry.
Motion by Carol.
Is that, I'm sorry, Mr. Hess, and then a second by
And
Mr. Carrico? Okay. Basically, boy, I'm trying to boil down the 2 weeks of conversations with lawyers and businesses and everything else down into a quick sentence here, and it's not possible. When we approved the vehicle purchase the first time, okay, I'm trying not to get convoluted as well. It involves Dodge Ram trucks, if you remember, and also Tahoes for the Sheriff's Police, plus a plow, a maintenance vehicle with a plow on it, because our plow truck looked like it was Swiss cheese. It was just ridiculous, full of rust and just not functioning, and we know that we had paid money to have that repaired. So as we got into that situation, we knew we needed amendment, because then all of a sudden they weren't making the Ram trucks, if you remember that. They decided to stop making those. So then we had to do an amendment to change this, and that's why we're on the third amended now, because the dealership where we got the plow from basically just let us drive it off the lot without any of the paperwork being done. And lo and behold, what are we, 3 months later, they're like saying, okay, well, who's going to pay for the truck? And, through our communications and it's sometimes miscommunications, we realized that was never executed into the lease for the Tahoes that are on order right now and the Explorers that are on order. So the immediate thing in front of us is we do have the cash, and that's what I'm asking the board to do. Let's just pay for the maintenance vehicle instead of going through all of these gyrations to do separate contracts and leases for something we have the cash to pay for. Because the second part of this situation is they're not making the Explorers because they're making ventilators. So we've got this COVID jumbled mess over here with the vehicles that are all intertwined, but the Tahoes are on order and they're probably going to be here in a month and a half. So the first thing is, can we pay for this truck so the dealership can get paid? And that amount is in here, and we have that in the bank, no problem. And then we come back once, and we have to do another amendment or a new resolution. I'm working with the state's attorney on that for the Tahoes, because technically the Explorers aren't even on order at this point, because there's no schedule to make them based on them producing ventilators instead. So I wished I had a better non-convoluted story to tell you, but I had to go through the sordid history so at least establish a basis of knowledge. So is there a motion to pay for just this vehicle? Wait a minute, we already got that part. We already got that part. So is there comments on any of this? Does anyone have a comment on paying for the vehicle first?
Motion.
I'm sorry, we have the motions. I forgot about that part. We do have the motions.
I'm gonna print off here shortly.
So is there a question about paying off this vehicle, or a comment, and then moving on to the other stuff?
You need a second? I'll second.
So no comment regarding that. So we have a motion and a second. Are we ready for a roll call on this vehicle? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Hess.
Aye.
Mrs. Polk.
Aye.
Mr. Snipes.
Aye.
Mr. Byrne.
Aye.
Mr. Seroy.
Aye.
Mr. Lear.
Aye.
Mrs. Weber.
Aye.
Mr. Payton.
Aye.
Mrs. Parker.
Aye.
Ms. Dunbar.
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger.
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield.
Aye.
Mr. Zenz.
Aye.
Ms. Haas.
Aye.
Mr. Carrico.
Aye.
Mr. Eckhoff.
Aye.
Mr. Smith. Mr. Swanson.
Aye.
Ms. Zakulo.
Aye.
Mr. Featherling.
Aye.
Mr. Dunhill.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Long.
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Motion carries. So thank you for that. We'll revisit the Tahoes and Explorers once we have better clarity on that. but it will have to be at this next finance committee meeting, and then it will come back to the full board again. So who knows if they're still going to be making ventilators? Maybe those other ones will go back on order again. So we'll take a look at that, and maybe at that point we'll have a good vision of our financial situation. But in some of those cases, we can't afford not to purchase those vehicles because the maintenance costs are getting up to the point where we need to start replacing those to stay in the rotation. Mr. Hess knows all about that. Okay, moving on to compensation. Every 4 years or 2 years as the county board goes, we have to, or 4 years depending on the term of election, we have to set the compensation for elected officials. Those are decisions that are made now for the next 4 years for the county-wides and next 2 years for county board members, because we have complete redistricting in 2 years after this election. So I guess for the sake of introduction, please try to consider that these are these salary increases, if you will, compensation, are for the office, not the individual. They are not performance-based. They are based on what that office is entitled to make via being an elected officer of the county. And I guess really that's all I had as far as the introduction. So I would need to know if you want to handle these individually, or would you like to have a motion to combine these and vote on them, or I think individually is best, but I thought I would ask the board what they want to do. So Mr. Kinzinger, did you have a question or a thought on that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to combine and treat these as one item.
I'll second that.
Okay, so there's a motion to combine and approve.
Yes.
And there was a second. Was that
Featherling?
John Featherling? Okay. Alrighty, so for the sake of explanation, I can go through and talk about these. Would you prefer that? Because we went through it in finance. I hope everybody went and watched the board meetings from finance, because that's why one of the reasons we record them, so people can do that on the board. But I'll just do a brief history lesson. In 2018 was the first time that we were able to authorize pay increases for the elected offices that were up at that point, which was sheriff, county clerk, county treasurer, and county board, and the chairman, and liquor commissioner, the same. But we authorized increases in those offices because they hadn't had increases, I believe, since 2010. And those were the dark days, if you will, going all the way through until really 17 is when things started to turn around. So we authorized those increases, and we talked about it at the time that the next go around it will be these offices' turn, because they hadn't had the pay increases in those offices. So and you will it's noted that at that time it was the county clerk, treasurer, and sheriff, and the clerk and treasurer made the same amount of money. Sheriff makes a little bit more, and at that point I asked the board to reduce the chairman's pay by $12,000 a year. So there was a $24,000 reduction in the salary for this seat that I'm in. And I'm asking that to continue, by the way, going forward, to still the $12,000 less than what it used to be. So moving into the spreadsheet, and if you want to throw that up there, I asked Anita to go out and look at the comps from other areas that are similar to ours or dissimilar, to provide some perspective, because as I started to look at particularly the coroner, I started to see pay in other areas where it was all over the map, and it wasn't really measuring up to what that office is, what we were paying now versus what the scale is in other areas. And you have to look at per capita, you know, the types of operations that they have to look for any outliers. So that's what we did, and I put those little boxes around there so I can kind of highlight where those averages come from. But if you were looking at, you know, really the brass tacks of this is, if you look at the bottom, it says average of like, which are like offices or like counties that we have here. And if you go across there, it's close to what we recommend. I will say that the auditor's recommendation is more than the average, only because it's drugged down so low by, frankly, a situation in Tazewell County that I don't agree with. They underfunded that auditor's office so much that it kind of skews the number. So I thought that it wasn't necessarily fair to do that to that office based on what Tazewell has done. But if you look at LaSalle and Kankakee, very similar. Didn't have Kendall's, but that was kind of what we could figure out from the online look that we had. And so the recommendation is to get the circuit clerk in the corner equal, because you see that in quite a few places or close, but then also try to smooth things out and make it so it's not a huge increase, but palatable for those offices, because again, the office, not the office holder, hasn't had an increase in this case since 2012. So I want to at least explain the methodology. It's $13,339 a year total per year. So obviously over the course of 4 years, it's times 4, but as I ran the numbers, that's 0.0375% of our budget increase. 0.0375. It's nominal. So, and then obviously the other recommendations were to keep, and that was of the Finance Committee, approved all of this to keep everything else the same on the chairman and the board member side. So yeah, that's really there's a motion to combine and approve, and I guess we'll open up the floor for comment or questions or anything else that you may have. And if you could, please use your hand raising tool, or wave in front of your face on the camera, and I'll try to notice either one and call on you.
Your hand raising.
Mr. Washington?
That wasn't me.
Okay.
Snipes.
Mr. Snipes, did you have something?
No, I'll say I was looking for the hand raising, but I don't see it down here.
Why?
If it was left to me, I'm not gonna not concur with the decision of the Finance Committee. I'm just personally kind of like round numbers, so I would have rather see 80,000, 70,000. But for whatever reason, they came up with those particular numbers. It was the consensus of them. I will not, I'm not going to vote against it. It's just that I kind of like to see round numbers, especially from the time that they not having an increase. Are we at 2020? So I would have just preferred to see them in round numbers, but if they're at the 79,900 or 69,900, that's fine. I just kind of prefer the round numbers.
All righty. Is there any other questions or comments? Mr. Zenz, did you have something?
Yes, just wanted to speak briefly on this. I appreciate the background research you did on that. I also understand that we have to decide this 180 days before the end of the term, or beginning of the term, as it were. I will say that while those folks have done a fine job in their positions, I think the optics on this send the wrong message. There are businesses shuttered, people currently unemployed, and we're giving out a raise. And while it may be justified or required, I just think it's, from an optics standpoint, the wrong thing to do. So while I've asked regarding a moratorium or a freeze of some sort, I'm going to have to be a no vote on this.
Is there other comment, questions? I'm sorry, Mr. Lear? I apologize. I'm trying to get everybody here, and it's hard to see on the squares.
I guess I was just moving my cursor around, but I will comment that I initially had some hesitation also in terms of this, because I am concerned about what the economy is going to do in the county in the next few months. I, however, was persuaded as I was reminded that these offices had not gotten increases in 8 years. And so having hope in the future, we may have a very difficult time in the next 3-6 months or so. I think that with the reserves the county has, it's appropriate to go ahead.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on this comment? Mr. for first time, I believe. First time comments? All righty, second time then. Mr. Snipes, did you have something?
Yes, while I appreciate the reserve that individuals have, when you go back to 2010, and I'm looking at these raises, they're not moved by far. It's like a couple of thousand. Even if it was at 3,000, you're talking over a span of 10 years. So you're talking $20 to $30 a month for the last 10 years. You're only talking, if it was 2,000, you're only talking a $200 a year almost raise. I think at some point, you know, common sense has to dictate that whatever this committee did, they took a look at both the raise and the factor that they didn't want to just go lavishly with the raises. So when they took it, this is actually extremely conservative, considering what individuals are getting in the market now and considering the raises that unions are getting. I cannot, it would just be a disservice if we did not vote for this, because again, the numbers, they're very nominal, and you're almost looking at $20 or $30 a month for the last 10 years, or whatever, which is about $2,000 or $3,000 at the most. So I'm for it because those individuals held out in the back. They could have complained, they didn't, and I think now is the time. I think we're in a position, and then when I looked at the aggregate number that Andy just mentioned, a collective of like 13,000 or whatever, I don't think that's going to make or break this county, and I think just due diligence should dictate that we need to move in this direction. That's just my comment.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on this from the board before we vote? Want to make sure everybody has a chance here. It's just a little bit different setup. Do we have another screen of people? No? Okay.
Chairman, we're going to vote on the resolution to motion to combine them first, and then
I thought it was combine and approve.
Okay.
It's a roll call for combining.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so the vote is, a motion is to combine and approve. That's what Dan was just asking me, to combine and approve, and we have a motion and a second. So if you're ready, we'll go ahead and do that. Roll call. Already, it looks like there's some muted, so we better.
Well, they do it. So
All right, so if you do have, this is gonna be a roll call vote, so please unmute your mics if you could. And we'll do those all at once. All right, thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Hess.
Aye.
Mrs. Polk.
Aye.
Mr. Snipes.
Yeah, aye.
Mr. Byrne.
Aye.
Mr. Seroy.
Aye.
Mr. Lear.
Aye.
Mrs. Weber.
Aye.
Mr. Payton.
Aye.
Mrs. Parker.
Aye.
Ms. Dunbar.
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger. Mr. Kinzinger.
Aye.
Does she need the number?
Mr. Fairfield.
Aye.
Mr. Zenz.
Yay.
Ms. Haas.
Aye.
Mr. Carrico.
Aye.
Mr. Eckhoff.
Aye.
Mr. Smith. Mr. Swanson.
Aye.
Ms. Zakulo.
Aye.
Mr. Featherling.
Aye.
Mr. Donnell,
Aye.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Long,
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler.
Aye. Motion carries. I see this sitting here, and I forgot, I mentioned that I was looking at unemployment, just as a point of information for the board. I've got the March filings here, and as a state, excuse me, I got a word cheaters. As a state, and this is just March, by the way, we had a 638% increase in unemployment filings for the end of March. We haven't got April yet, obviously. The highest percentage increase was DuPage County at 1,348% increase. And the lowest was Henderson County at 271% increase. So average 638%. We are dead set right in the middle as a county at 585% increase. So we're literally number 51. So I wanted to at least provide that, which is, I don't want to say surprising, because a lot of counties our size are up towards the top of the list. And I think it speaks to the kind of manufacturing we have in the area, being food related or critical infrastructure like vaccines and things like that. So I wanted to at least mention that for some perspective. We're not the worst and we're not the best. We're sitting right in the middle, of this whole situation. So it's still not good. That number is still at 3,000 for March. Normally it's 300. So but I just want to provide that perspective. It's something I got worked up yesterday after talking with unemployment folks. And actually thanks to LaDonna Russell at the Workforce Board for helping me out with that too. So moving on, the temporary, excuse me, could you read the title of the next item into the record?
Absolutely. Ordinance of the County Board of Kankakee County, Illinois regarding the temporary suspension of collection of hotel operators' occupation tax late fees.
Alrighty, so first of all, is there a motion to approve? And I can give you some history on this. Mr. Seroy, and who is the second?
Second.
Mrs. Akulo, I believe?
Yes.
Okay. So basically, I got a phone call from the Convention and Visitors Bureau, Stacy Wilkin, asking, what can the county do as far as these hotels who are sitting at, well, some of them almost zero, many, might as well be zero. They're ghost towns, and they're struggling. And what can we do to help them? Just like anybody should ask that cares about their membership and the people they serve. So the best, as I talked with Nick Africano, our treasurer, about the best we could offer is that we can not charge them late fees on their monthly filings into the county until this situation is over. And that's the way the resolution is written. They still have the obligation to pay, but they're in survival mode, like many of us are. And really, all of this is, or at least a vast majority of this money is going into an escrow account because of the lawsuit between that Bradley and the CVB are in. So this money isn't even going to be spent anyway by the entities that it's meant to go to. So I thought it was a reasonable ask of the board to just basically kind of forego any penalties. They still have to work with us, but in a delayed manner. So did we have a motion in a second? Yeah, we did. Is there questions about this or comments from anyone?
I have a question.
Mr. Byrne?
I have no problem helping out local businesses, but are we gonna, I know this may be discussion in finance, what about discussion about helping just property owners in general all over Kankakee County?
I don't want to muddy the issue with this too much, but that is something for Finance Committee this month that we're going to talk about. But realize that discussion can't just happen at the county board level. It has to happen with the school districts, with the municipalities, the fire protection districts, the drainage districts, everybody that is involved. The county just collects the money and gives it out to all their local taxing bodies. So we can't make arbitrary decisions for Kankakee School District or Bradley Bourbonnais, Bradley City, all of these people. We can't make that decision. But we can talk about what we can do, and that's what we're going to do this month in the Finance Committee meeting. There's a lot of work to do before then, but we don't have the ability to say, just only pay half your bill, or we can't do that. But what we can do is try to make it a little bit of a softer blow if we possibly can. That's what I'm looking at.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yep. Any other questions about this one in particular, hotel motel? It's not that much money, but that little bit of money is actually keeping a lot of these hotels operational. And I'm doing something similar with, just so you know, as liquor commissioner, because all the liquor licenses are coming due, and the state is allowing people to file late, if you will, just kind of extend 3 months, and then they could, because obviously all of the bars and restaurants or bar restaurants are closed for the most part. They are doing packaged liquor to go, and some were deciding that they were going to be open with their lights off, and we found out and stopped that situation. So, but anyway, any more questions about this? All right, I believe this can be a voice vote. Let's do a roll call just in case, because we're not collecting money. Let's just make sure that we're okay, just in case. Roll call, please.
Mr. Washington. Mr. Washington?
Aye.
Mr. Hess?
Aye.
Mrs. Polk?
Aye.
Mr. Snipes?
Aye.
Mr. Byrne?
Aye.
Mr. Searle?
Aye.
Mr. Lear?
Aye.
Mrs. Weber?
Aye.
Mr. Payton?
Aye.
Mrs. Parker?
Aye.
Ms. Dunbar?
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger?
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield?
Aye.
Mr. Zenz?
Aye.
Ms. Haas?
Aye.
Mr. Carrico?
Aye.
Mr. Eckhoff?
Aye.
Mr. Smith? Mr. Swanson?
Aye.
Ms. Zakulo?
Aye.
Mr. Featherling?
Aye.
Mr. Dunhill?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Long?
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler?
Aye. Motion carries. So moving on, we are going to take a look at 41, 42, 51, and 52 kind of at the same time, because they're all part of the same process. So if I could, let's get all 4 of those titles read in the record, and then we can start to have Dell do some explaining, and maybe we can get through this pretty quickly.
Resolution of the County Board of Kankakee County, Illinois. Resolution authorizing execution and amendment of Section 5311 Grant Agreement. Resolution authorizing execution and amendment of Downstate Operating Assistance Grant Agreement fiscal year 2021. Resolution regarding the purchase of service agreement with Showbus to operate the county's rural general public transportation service, state fiscal year 2021. Resolution regarding motor vehicle lease with Showbus to provide transportation for Kankakee County.
Okay, before we have a motion, I did want to have at least ask Dell a couple of questions. Are you there, Dell?
I'm here. I'm actually the phone number that's on there. I lost my phone in my cell.
And then we also got Ben on there as well. Ben, are you available?
I am.
Okay, good. So I was going to do the same thing again to ask if we wanted to make a motion to combine and approve these via roll call vote, because this is all part of our Showbus program. To basically I'll tell you what, I'm not gonna explain this. I'll let Ben and Dell go ahead and do this. You guys decide who wants to talk about Showbus, how it's basically funded, the pass-through, downstate operating, and then our end of it, why we have to do these agreements for $1 a year and then local match and all that stuff. So you guys kind of take it from here.
Ben, I'll let you go ahead and take it.
All right, thank you. So this is 2 grant applications, one for downstate operating assistance funds through IDOT and one through Section 5311. in order to submit these two applications, which are due on the 24th, so in 10 days, we have to have a subsequent service agreement with a service provider, and we as a county do not actually offer the drivers and the service itself. So we execute, and we went out and publicized and said we're looking for a service provider. So Show Bus responded. We have about 13 vehicles that we received through the consolidated vehicle procurement, and then we lease those vehicles back to Show Bus for $1. And I guess the one thing on the resolution, Chairman Wheeler, we're going to lease the in-county vehicles for $1 and the 2 out-of-county vehicles for $1. So the resolution reads $1. It's actually $2. We'll lease those. And the reason that's split up that way is our new frontline fleet vehicles are kept in Kankakee County, and then we've got 2 essential backup vehicles. They could either be parted out or utilized as backup stock. They're housed outside of the county. So we, at the request of a county board in a previous term, wanted to make sure that our vehicles were staying in Kankakee County and being used for Kankakee County residents. So that's why mainline, frontline vehicles, that's fleet 13 through 24, stays here, and then the subsequent 2 other vehicles are outside. To the chairman's earlier point about local contribution and local match and in-kind match, we're still requesting a not to exceed 15,000 number. The actual grant will be matched with in-kind funds, some funds from Show Bus, some funds from Metro Transit. Our requirement is actually about $60,000, but we're requesting the county board not to exceed 15. We'll continue to work on those service contracts to get that number down to 0 if possible. But the request is from a budgetary standpoint for 15, not to exceed 15,000, Chairman.
And so the dollar, are you talking about the third whereases and the paperwork here?
Yeah, so in Exhibit A on the whereas on the lease agreement, I was holding my button to mute myself. Yeah, so we got the third whereas on the motor vehicle lease with Show Bus. The lessee will pay a sum of $2. We've got, because the exhibit has 2 lease agreements on it.
Oh, the out of county is $2.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's got $1 and $1.
Okay. All right.
And
so all our financial woes are now fixed because of that dollar. So
we wanted to get it right and make sure we had it. So the application, standard application, these are documents that become included in the standard application, and that's why we're kind of lumping all 4 into one request. We're going to receive far more grant dollars than we're going to be able to utilize based on local match. We'll receive about $1.4 million, and the matching of that, we've never been able to secure $350,000 or $400,000 to match it fully. But as we continue to look for new vendor contracts, the goal would be to utilize the entirety of the grant. But I will tell you, in the state, not a lot of the transit providers are able to utilize as much match as they receive, and we receive a bump every year, and it just the numbers escalate, which is good for transit, but we've just never been able to utilize the full dollar.
Okay, thank you for that. So you're going to work with Assistant State's Attorney Nicholson to get this fixed as far as what the language needs to be. Yeah, but
exactly. And then there's some final concurrence. The state's attorney has to sign off on the uniform applications. Obviously, the chairman's got 12 signature locations, but once authorized, we'll get the information to Chairman Wheeler and Nancy.
Okay, so with that noted amendment, is there a motion to combine and approve these from the floor, and then we'll get into questions? Mr. Fairfield, second. Is there? I'm sorry, second.
Jim Byrne.
Mr. Byrne. All righty. Yep. Now we can get into any questions about this. It's really standard fare. We do these every year. We have to reapply and do this deal. I don't just do this dance, if you will. But I want to make sure new board members or anybody has a chance to ask questions. Ready to roll call? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Hess.
Aye.
Mrs. Polk.
Aye.
Mr. Snipes.
Aye.
Mr. Byrne.
Aye.
Mr. Seroy.
Aye.
Mr. Lear.
Aye.
Mrs. Weber.
Aye.
Mr. Payton.
Aye.
Mrs. Parker.
Aye.
Ms. Dunbar. Ms. Dunbar?
She may have left a name.
Okay. Mr. Kinzinger?
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield?
Aye.
Mr. Zenz? Mr. Zenz? Ms. Haas?
Aye.
Mr. Carrico?
Aye.
Mr. Eckhoff?
Aye.
Mr. Smith? Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Swanson?
Aye.
Ms. Zakulo? Ms. Zakulo?
Aye.
Mr. Featherling?
Aye.
Mr. Donnell?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Long?
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler?
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. I guess if we could read the title of the following into the record, can we get a chance?
Resolution of the County Board of Kankakee County, Illinois regarding authority for the County Board Chairman to sign an agreement between Kankakee County and Dude Solutions for the Kankakee County Building Permitting Automation Software.
All right, we'll start off with a motion on the floor on this one.
Motion.
Was that
Second.
Mr. Carrico? And who was the second? We have a second? I apologize.
Featherling.
Mr. Featherling. Heard you, sorry. We get everybody at once. It's tough. Any questions on this? Mr. Hess, did you have a question or a comment?
Nope.
Okay. Alrighty, this was the funding mechanism for this was approved earlier in the meeting. So it allows us to move forward with Dude Solutions. The Dude, I guess. So I'm trying to figure that out. I wonder if these are related to our facility Dude that we work with on our building and grounds software. It's the same company. Okay. So are we all aware what this software is and does and the amount of money that it's projected to save us? I just want to make sure that we're all on board because Dell can answer any questions you may have regarding what this is and why we're doing it and all that stuff. Well, why we're doing it, you know, but he knows the. Mr. Snipes, do you have a question for Dell?
Mr. Chairman, I think it would be wise if we just get Dell to give a brief narrative since we might know, but the community might not know. So just a brief narrative.
Yeah, Dell, if you want to go ahead and just give us a briefing on that.
All right. We've the planning department has been in a need for some type of software solution for quite a while, and over the past couple of years, we've been evaluating various platforms. And the Dude Solutions, which their software is called SmartGov, is the one that rose to the top that would meet our needs. What this will allow us to do is to improve communications between us and all of our clients and constituents, and provide us with 24-hour, 7-day-a-week access to all of our information from anywhere that we have an internet connection. So our inspectors in the field will no longer have to write forms out on paper and then bring them back to the office, and then we file them, and then we have to search the files. This puts it all into one digital database. It also creates a digital dashboard so that the management staff and we can actually give access to the county board for that at a level that you can actually see day to day what's going on. Where are our inspections? How many have we had? How much revenue have we brought in? How many permits do we have out? Where are they located? That type of stuff.
So what type of services will this enhance for the public? What will the public be able to do that they couldn't do yesterday?
Well, they would be able to go through the entire permit process and never actually enter our office if they so chose to. They could apply for their permit online, pay for it online, schedule all of their inspections online, other than the possibility of meeting one of our inspectors out in the field while they're doing the inspection. They wouldn't necessarily have to come in contact with us at all. So that would be a convenience for the contractors out there that are juggling multiple projects. They can actually manage those projects right through the same portal, so they would know exactly if the status of their inspections, the status of each of their permits, and know where they're at in the process, know if there's any corrections that need to be made so they can move on. So there is a benefit to the public and the contractors as well.
And is this projected to reduce or allow you to repurpose current staff, and it may preclude you from hiring people if and when the time comes that we see a turn in the economy and houses start getting built?
Right. I don't have a crystal ball for the future. I don't think any of us does, but it's my intention that this will likely keep us from having to hire any additional staff because of the savings. And we may be able to actually repurpose some of the staff that we do have to perform more duties in the same allotted time.
Excellent. Any other questions from the board on this? We've seen demos, we've seen what it does, on the PZA side of things at that committee. So should be somewhat up to speed on that. So if we're ready, we can go ahead and do a roll call vote unless somebody has another question. Roll call vote.
Mr. Washington. Mr. Hess.
Aye.
Mrs. Polk.
Aye.
Mr. Snipes.
Aye.
Mr. Byrne.
Aye.
Mr. Seroy.
Aye.
Mr. Lear.
Aye.
Mrs. Weber.
Aye.
Mr. Payton.
Aye.
Mrs. Parker.
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger.
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield.
Aye.
Ms. Haas. Ms. Haas?
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Carrico.
Aye.
Mr. Eckhoff.
Aye.
Mr. Smith. Mr. Swanson.
Aye.
Ms. Zakulo.
Aye.
Mr. Featherling.
Aye.
Mr. Dunhill.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Long.
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler.
Aye. Motion carries. Moving on to other business. I believe that's, one opening on the Mantino number 9 drainage district. Seems like that's been on there quite a while. 3 openings on the County Regional Planning Commission, 1 opening on the County GIS Committee, county board member, and 2 openings on the Kankakee County Farmland Assessment Review Committee. I have 1 application for reappointment in hand, but we will definitely need another person on that committee. Someone is not able to continue to serve in that capacity. So moving on to old business, I don't know if anybody has old business or if you have questions about what we're doing with COVID. Is Mr. Beavis, maybe, I think I see John on there. If anybody has any questions for John or for me, what I've been doing, it's really, this is a kind of an open forum for you to ask those questions.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Hess? Hold on a second, Bones. All right, now you're back on. Go ahead.
Okay, could John give us a quick update, as long as he's on?
John, are you able to provide an update?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. As of this morning, Kankakee County stands at, I believe, 120 positive cases, and we've had 11 deaths as of yesterday afternoon. I believe we're at 33 recoveries. We've been able to start posting that, I think, last week, the recoveries, and that brought a lot of positive feedback from the community. Is that satisfactory enough there? Or did you want more?
No, that's what I was looking for, was total numbers and that. Do you know, John, do you know if any of the recoveries have given blood for the plasma or anything like that yet?
Oh gosh, no, I wouldn't have any idea whether they've done anything like that.
Okay.
The the numbers are one thing. I'd given John a call and asked about infographics, putting those on the website, and his team jumped right on that. I hope those infographics have helped people take a look at the way that this is kind of presenting itself in the community. I thank John for his team for jumping on that. It's helped the public. But I also want to remind the board, everything we do should point people to the health department, because they are the front line responders in all of this as far as the coordinating entity for the county. We shouldn't, point people at, Facebook pages or anything else. The full, complete, vetted information is available from the health department and their Facebook page. And I'm getting a lot of calls about, well, not a lot of calls. Some people are saying, why am I not doing Facebook Live and things like that? Well, that's not my job. That's John's job, is to keep the public informed. Because if you have too many points of information, it gets muddy. So everything we have done from the day that we activated the EOC on kind of a soft activation, if you will. We're not sitting in that room at the Emergency Operations Center out at the Sheriff's Complex. We're not sitting out there all day long. But what we did is we started a communication tool where the hospitals, the health department, all the stakeholders are communicating with all the mayors every week, and we're using the county's emergency operations as a communication vehicle. It's a very important thing because there wasn't a lot of information some 3 weeks ago that was being coordinated from everybody. So that has been my role as far as in this situation. Beyond that, John and his team have done a fantastic job because, you've got like 4 or 5 nurses out there that have to do all the questionnaires, find out who everybody's been in contact with that's a positive. It's just a daunting amount of work that the health department is under. And they obviously have their own board and their own management, but we are coordinating those efforts with us and the hospital. So there's a lot you don't see up front that is going on behind the scenes. And I guess I would point to I had a conversation with the people that own the mall about 2 weeks ago, and they agreed that if we needed to, we could have a mobile testing facility at the mall, use their anchor stores, whether it's drive-through, whatever, because we still don't have test kits for the public. They're all held by the hospitals, so we don't have the ability, but that was our backup to a backup. I had to reach out and find out if things went really south, what are we doing? When I saw that the federal government was pushing all of the testing through the states, I reached out to both our representatives and our lobbyists and received a call back from the governor's office when I offered up to have a testing facility out at the mall on a regional basis. Now, I don't know if they're going to do it or not, but know that that's the kind of role that I have taken beyond the HR and the operations of the county and their employees, as much as we can manage out of our department and not out of the elected officials' discretion. So, there's a lot goes on every day. Believe me, these are a lot of 12-hour days sitting here, and that's 6 days a week. So, but just know that it's more the health department is the point on this stuff, and the public needs to know that they are the ones who have the information and are able to respond and are really managing this, as they voted to do when they approved them via referendum some 20 years ago or whatever. The health department is the lead, and we should point people in their direction. So, did you have something, Mr. Kinzinger? Sorry, you're on mute. Hold on just a second. Go ahead.
I would like to piggyback. Mr. Beavis is here, and he has my sincerest compliments. They have been doing an excellent job keeping us informed on a daily basis. I'm not on the inner workings, but it's just an excellent job, well done in the county, and I'd like to thank him publicly.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Snipes first.
I would also send kudos out to the health department. I just only have one question, and I guess it will probably be a statewide question, but yet it will be also to the county. And I know that individuals, we've had cases where individuals have expired or died because of the virus. I don't know if it's the virus or the complication from the virus. But one of the concerns I do have is how is this COVID, if they're dying from this COVID-19, how is it that they're determining it? Because the cost would be kind of astronomical if they're always using a pathologist. So either you have an autopsy or a pathologist determine whether or not these are actually COVID deaths. has that been determined, or what process do they use to determine whether or not these are COVID deaths or complications from COVID?
Is that a question for John, hear me?
I hope so.
Sipes?
Yes.
Okay, I'm not quite sure. My understanding is in relation to a patient who is tested positive and then ultimately succumbs to death as a result of that, then my understanding is so far for most of the cases worldwide, here in Illinois and in Kankakee, there have been underlying medical conditions with each of those individuals. So, you know, there is discussion out there in relation to, you know, well, was it a heart attack that killed somebody or was it COVID that killed somebody? But as a result of the fact that they were positive for COVID, then COVID is being attributed to that death in relation to that counting as the statistic at this point for the COVID death. Okay. It's not something specifically that the health department is, you know, that we're here doing, or even that the state health department is doing, but, you know, through the process of an individual having tested positive, whether they're passing away under hospice care or in the hospital, if they had a positive COVID result and then succumbed to death, my understanding is that it's being attributed to COVID at this point.
Okay, then additional question is, as you're reading in the media and even in the newspaper locally here, there is a high number of African Americans being affected by this particular virus. We know that they didn't bring it here, but some kind of way it's being contracted here. So what would you give as far as advice to those individuals in the particular community as to safeguards so that the numbers will not escalate?
Well, what I'm going to continue to do and preach is the information that we're giving out through our social media that then is shared by everyone out there, is that we all, the human race, follows the social distancing and the guidelines. You know, that's ultimately what we're dealing with here. I'm very aware, and there's more information that's starting to come out that is indicating that the African American community seems to be taking a brunt of the deaths in terms of the total number of deaths in relation to the COVID, but not necessarily statistically in relation to the population density that a community may have, whether it's Chicago, Cook County, the state of Illinois, or the United States in general. But there's definitely some underlying medical conditions that some ethnicities have more so than another, which would include things like diabetes, high blood pressure, asthma, and things like that, obesity, in relation to some of these underlying medical conditions then that are impacting the individuals that are dying. So it's a number that we're trying to look at and see if we can get a handle on to get a little more information here locally. We do know that we have the state's numbers in relation to what they put out, but not all the records that are being turned in from every individual necessarily answer the question of race. So that is a number that there's a number of blanks, so it's hard to fill in that blank. But it is something that we're looking at. But for the most part right now, the message that we put out for social distancing, the message that we put out for washing your hands, covering your mouth when you cough, that applies to each and every one of us all over, all through Kankakee County.
Thank you.
Thank you. And John, we've talked about this, but do we have, you just explained a little bit about your local limitations on the data, because sometimes that the boxes aren't checked, if you will. Does the state provide us, Kankakee County, information based on race of people that are contracting the disease or the virus versus, you know, deaths and all of that? Do they break it out, or do they collect it, or do they make it available somehow? Because I haven't seen local numbers along those lines. I see things from Chicago and things from, you know, the state puts out about the state, but nothing about our county. I just hear anecdotal things.
Right. I believe that the state is where I've seen the most recent numbers, as I'd explained to you, Andy, through some of the webinars, the mini webinars that we're attending and being a part of every day in relation to the statistics statewide for racial numbers. And in lieu of that, it doesn't break it down locally to the county. We would have to manufacture that number, and it's not something that the health department had originally started with as we started tracking this. I don't know that anyone knew, day one and going, this is an ongoing investigation right now. It's changing every day. We all know that. So that wasn't necessarily on the radar back then, but we would need to manufacture that locally. This is a question that's starting to come up in our daily meetings. It is something that we can do, but we're going to have to create and find those numbers ourselves. And as a result of that, then it's going to be backtracking through, all of these cases. Or there's some other ideas that we may have, and, we can go offline and discuss that later. But it is something that we are going to try to see if we can get a better glimpse of maybe what's going on here in Kankakee County versus, say, a Cook County or DuPage or Will County or something like that. And then we can compare that with what we know our population numbers are.
Is there anything that the board, individual members can do to help you and the health department in this situation?
I know that I appreciate the kudos that everyone's giving to the health department. I'll pass that along to my staff. We have been, as everyone has, it's not just us, being on the front lines here. We have a number of individuals who are putting in incredible amounts of overtime, and many of them are salaried. So it's kind of like a pat on the back, and thank you very much for that. But they're there doing it, and they're continue to do it. And so we're just asking that, as Chairman Wheeler indicated, please help push this message out. When we share things on our Facebook, on our website, if you have liked our page, please share that with your community. Share them with all your friends that you are friends with on Facebook, because the more you spread that out, then the more the message gets out there. And we've been able to stay consistent with the message over the past 4.5 weeks. I think I'm seeing, in the community, then on Facebook, you're beginning to see the public defend us in some people's responses when they see maybe a rumor or something like that. They say, no, check the health department out. They have the most up-to-date numbers. The state lags behind a little bit. We're trying to be a little more up to speed than they are even, but eventually the numbers do catch up. But, the state's got good numbers, but ours will be a little more fresher. So just continue to do that and preach what we're trying to push out there, especially with the social distancing. We still have a half a month of this left. The idea is that we flatten this curve, and I'm cautiously optimistic that the past few days, and even with Illinois, that maybe we're beginning to see that.
I know there was one other follow-up I had. You mentioned flattening the curve, and you did share some of your good news that you see maybe the cases are going down, but that's not a time to relax. Obviously, on social distancing, it's a time to remain firm. I'm sure that's your opinion.
Most definitely, yeah. This is, if this were a marathon race, we're in the middle of it, or we're just about to hit the wall. So now's not the time to give up. We need to keep doing it. We're definitely trying to protect the most vulnerable populations that are out there. I do notice less cars out. I do notice less people out. So I think for the most part, people are following that social distancing guidelines. And in the next few weeks, that's where we're hopefully going to really see this number start to come down, which was the whole goal in the first place, is so that we don't overwhelm the system all at once, that we can pace ourselves a little bit so that coming out of this, it's not that the virus is going to go away and nobody's going to get it anymore, but hopefully, the cases that we see will be more manageable than what we're seeing from the original start.
Sure. And Jackie Haas, did you have a question?
I just wanted to echo, what everyone else has said, and thank John and his staff for everything that they've done. And as a behavioral health provider, we're here to support them as well. And just wanted to reiterate that. And we're here too. So John, if you need us, let me know.
I will. Thank you, Jackie, very much.
You know, I have one last question. It's something I get a lot of. Test kits. And again, I know we talked about this. John and I talk almost every day, but some days we get really busy and don't. But we talked this morning about test kits. Are they available yet to the general public or to be administered to the general public? Could you give the rundown to the board on what the situation is?
Yes, I can. Thank you. Currently, the testing is still predominantly for at-risk individuals and are being performed through the hospitals, Amita, St. Mary, and Riverside. You would need a doctor's order to be able to do that. They're trying to focus on healthcare workers, first responders, predominantly first. So there's still limitations locally on the number of kits available. There is another organization, Midwest Physicians, I believe, that is doing testing within the community. Now those are more, I think they are going to try to do first responders there, but, potentially I guess the public could get in there and have some tests taken in regards to COVID. However, the turnaround time is the difference here. So at Midwest Physicians, what I've heard as of yesterday is that the turnaround time for a result, negative or positive for Midwest, is approximately 5 to 10 days to know. And then the turnaround time for the hospital's tests are 2 to 3 days at this point. So the labs are still playing catch up on some of the results that they're needing to finish. I think the state's doing a good job slowly processing that and getting them caught up. And as more kits become available, then we'll start to see more advertisements, and obviously we'll put that information out when we're aware of it, of where the public can go. There's discussions that some, they're looking at having some testing availability in the future. Nobody can say when, that might be able to say whether or not, I had COVID and do I have the antibodies. There are some that are being, I think, tested right now on a small trial basis to see if that works. But right now, nothing like that is available here in Kankakee County. It's just the testing. And again, we're still kind of focusing on the at-risk individuals. Otherwise, we're asking people again, if you're sick and, just not seriously sick, we need you to stay home, not report to work. Go through the motions until you're better, talk to your physicians, and then assume that you're positive.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that, John. Is there any other questions from the group?
Yes.
Mr. Washington?
John, the overall count and the death count, does that include the patients at Shapiro?
Yes.
Thank you.
Is that roughly half? What are you able to talk about numbers?
What I can say there is that, and we report this on our website. The total cases, if we're at about 120, as of yesterday afternoon, we had 120 positive cases. I think approximately 80 are what we call long-term health care facilities related. That's more than one. We have more than one considered outbreak within the county. We have numerous healthcare facilities, long-term care facilities with vulnerable populations, not just, the one that was mentioned there. So obviously that one has been in the news and has had a number of cases, but in relation to like I said, the past few days, this Easter weekend, we did not see large increases in numbers overall between all those facilities. So that's hopeful going in there. But yes, our current numbers are approximately a little over 50% of our total positive cases are related to long-term care facilities, which frankly is not a shocking thing to be saying. That is where most of the vulnerable populations are being housed due to, their medical conditions, their age and things like that.
Yeah, and John, I just want to make sure you said 120, it's 220, correct?
I'm sorry. Yes.
Okay.
220.
Yeah, it's
I wish
220.
it was 120. I
That's
remember
okay.
the days when it was 120.
I had to look it up
yes,
just to make sure I wasn't off. So, And it's the one thing we were talking about is the new cases that are coming in. We're going to look at a new infographic that kind of assesses the curve as we keep talking about it. You know, right now we have a graph that it's very informative on the total cases, but if you start to look at new case reporting, we're going to be able to start to see hopefully that flatten and decrease. And I think maybe from a health perspective, maybe you can comment, but one big concern is that we jump the gun too quickly and then get into our old habits again, and then we start to see that rise before we're out of the woods. So I know that's a predictive model you don't have. You're just managing, you know, this today and tomorrow and the next day, but is there any thoughts that you have on that?
Actually, Andy, after we talked about that, I did talk to Alicia. She's the one who's been helping put up a lot of those new graphs for us. We do have that. That is for the daily cases. So I think that that's something that in the very near future here, we can probably get that put up because she's already, you know, adding to it each day. I will just say that though, where we're, you know, the comment, if we want to flatten the curve, this graphic doesn't exactly right now look like a curve because we have a short amount of time in relation to how it looks. So it's more of a spiky curve, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But it does demonstrate that, you know, last week we had a high peak, and that this past week it seems to be back down to, you know, a more agreeable hope. Like I said, that cautiously optimistic that curve is coming down without hopefully future spikes. But that is something we can get up, I think, in the very near future.
Thank you for that. Anything helps graphically. Anybody else have questions? Mr. Lear, did you have something? Just a second, sir. Hold on just a second. Are you muted on your end? Did you hit mute?
Hit unmute.
Okay.
There we go. I want to congratulate you for the conversation you had with the mall. I think it's useful to be sharing with the board that kind of activity because while we don't want to panic the public in terms of a worst case scenario, it's useful to know that preparations are being made in case something should go wrong. My second comment would be directed more to Mr. Beavis in terms of a reference you made, Mr. Chairman, about a potential second wave. I've wrote a little bit about not doing this too quickly, and I wonder, as I understand it, one of the keys to avoiding the second wave is to maintain that social distancing and hand washing, but also to be able to test people as they become positive and then do the contact tracking. Do you think you've got enough resources in terms of contact tracking, or could county board members do something if you need more resources in that area?
At this point, I'm not sure. We'll have to work with the state health department, obviously the state of Illinois, in relation to as they start to take off the restrictions that were put on. My guess is they will not, you know, just May 1st all of a sudden say, okay, everything back to normal. I'm going to guess that they'll slowly peel away the onion, so to speak, and then definitely, you know, as of right now, the answer would probably be no. We wouldn't have the people or the resources to necessarily do that, but we're not even sure what do that means at this point. You know, the state would have to have some things available for us or make them available to us, such as these additional new kits. I've done a little bit of the reading in regards to these tests for, you know, like whether or not I've had COVID, for example. It's in its early stages. Some of the downsides are that, you know, some of the previous coronavirus diseases that are out there theoretically could show up positive and give you a false sense that, oh, okay, I'm testing for COVID-19 when really you're not. You might be testing for, you know, the coronavirus from 10 years ago kind of a thing. So, you know, they're looking into that to make sure then that they tighten up that test and that the results are going to be accurate in regards to what they're being done. And then, you know, whether or not we're testing those individuals and then the contract tracking, as you said, we're just going to have to see what the state is asking or guiding us to do, and then see if we have the ability to do that at that time.
Okay, well, I hope you'll share with the county board members anything we can do to be a voice to make sure you have the resources you need.
Oh, most definitely. I appreciate that.
Any other questions for John? Mr. Snipes?
Just have one that I got to ask, and that's and I believe it's almost because they're looking at Chicago, but they consider that there's a disparity between the have and have-nots, and to just be more definitive is to say that people that have health insurance, they believe will be able to get the testing. However, those individuals who don't have health insurance, they believe may be turned away. Is there anything in place, or is there anything that could be in place? Was there any way that we can get the state to, I guess, provide a solution to those individuals who may not have health care to be sufficiently tested if they believe that they have this COVID-19? I can't hear him. I think you got him muted.
Sorry, go ahead, John.
Okay, my understanding is that, you know, all insurances, or most insurances, now this is obviously people who are covered by insurances, we're going to cover the costs associated with being tested for COVID-19, and then that individuals wouldn't be turned away to be tested for COVID-19. Now, again, Mr. Snipes and everyone, you know, there's a lot of people who just, you know, want to know and are wanting to be tested, who have symptoms, maybe don't have symptoms. And what we're trying to say here is that there are not enough test kits available at this point to do that all the way around the board. So they're focusing on individuals who are high risk, you know, that are exhibiting symptoms and, you know, pretty much need to be put into the hospital. Otherwise, everyone's being asked to stay at home, to shelter in place, to quarantine, to self-isolate, so to speak, and then avoid crowds and avoid people so that we don't spread this out. And if you recover and were never positive, you know, never tested officially, it's assumed that you were, and down the road, which isn't ready yet, maybe there'll be a test that's available that will say, yes, I had it, versus whether I had the flu, whether I had a cold, whether I had bronchitis, or whatever else.
Right.
So to clarify, John, I just want to make sure I heard that correctly. The protocols on testing are based on insurance or Medicaid or anything else. It's based on at risk and symptoms.
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay, that's what I want to make sure. That's what I thought I heard.
Right. What I heard that a doctor had to refer them, and in some cases, if an individual doesn't have insurance, they're not going to be able to see the doctor to refer them. So I was wondering if I do know that I don't know if this still exists, but I think there's a couple where we have these free clinics. Is there any way we can empower them to be the doctor for those that don't have the wherewithal to go to a doctor because they don't have insurance?
I can check on that, Mr. Snipes, and get back to you. I know that there have been some emails from some individuals and some other organizations that are trying to reach out, that there are some members in some communities in Kankakee County, Pembroke, Sun River Terrace, that have a more difficult time, you know, being able to even drive into town, that have concerns and have been asking, is it possible for the testing to be brought to them? Right now, that's not an availability through the hospitals or this Midwest physician. So there are some individuals and agencies that are looking into that. So let me see if I can get a better answer for you than what I'm able to give right now.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions for John or for me about what we're doing? Jackie?
I just wanted to emphasize that anyone who's covered by Medicaid will have testing covered. So HFS did put out a provider notice that reflects that.
All right. And I don't know the percentages of people that are covered by health insurance and or Medicaid in the state of Illinois, but it is a broad swath, and it's just a matter if their doctor accepts Medicaid assignment. You know, because not all doctors take that. So to Mr. Snipes' point, that is accurate. Hippocrates and other people in the community may be able to fill that void.
Correct.
So I think that's where he was going with that. Any other questions, thoughts, comments?
One comment.
Yes, sir.
Are we in new business or just still old, or just?
We're just in business now. Whatever you need it to be.
Okay. I do know that the county board is only meeting today, and we also going to have a finance meeting. So that means the rest of the month we're probably not meeting. I do know the governor says there should be no pay breaks in the whole 9 yards, but I would just like it to be entertained, and hopefully maybe in May, probably go to the finance committee to see if we can take the dollars that we're not going to be meeting with, that we usually customarily pay out, you know, to the county board members and things of this nature, for the meetings that they're not going to be attending. If those dollars can be on this one-time basis, the aggregate amount, if we can agree upon, can be now contributed to getting the mask and things for first responders, and maybe for individuals that are less fortunate that can't basically get these masks. But if we could take that little aggregate amount of the savings that we're probably going to have this month and contribute it to that particular cause on a one-time basis. It's just a thought.
All right. Anyone else have any old or new business? All righty, then I guess at this point a motion to adjourn is in order, Mr. Hess?
Oh, yes, sir.
All righty, is there a second to Mr. Hess's ongoing motion?
Featherling.
Mr. Featherling has a second there. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Thank you so much for joining, and hopefully this worked out okay on the Brady Bunch style meeting we have here. So